Alright, so in this video we're going to be taking a quick walkthrough of the updated E-Snare device in the recently released Bitwig 2.0. So like most of the other devices in Bitwig, the biggest changes from version 1 to version 2 is a subtle interface refresh. They've cleaned things up, moved things around just a little bit, and kind of polished it up to look better on higher resolution displays. And then the other major changes is they've stripped out the few sources of modulation that were really just velocity, timbre, and pressure that were in the original E-Snare, and now in the new Bitwig 2.0, for every device, they've moved all of those over to the modulators tab in the left-hand corner of the device, where we get some slots, or as many slots as we need, to click and add in additional modulation sources like LFOs, envelopes, or the list goes on. So then the lay of the land with the device is that it's divided up into sections based upon functionality. We have, starting in the top left-hand corner, oscillator 1, followed by oscillator 2, then the noise section, the low pass and high pass, or low cut and high cut filter section, the mix section down at the bottom, and then our global output, where we can put things like additional audio effects, adjust the velocity sensitivity of the volume of this E-Snare, and adjust the global output, volume output of this. So now the sound making process of the E-Snare starts with shaping oscillator 1 or oscillator 2 and setting the tuning of those. So similar to some of the other drum synthesizers or percussive synthesizers inside of Bitwig, these two oscillators are kind of paired together. So oscillator 1 sets its tuning and decay, and then oscillator 2 is tuned as an offset in relationship to oscillator 1, as well as its decay or its amplitude envelope, which only has a decay period, is set as a percentage of the time set in oscillator 1. The device as a whole has no key tracking, so it doesn't care what notes we trigger it with. It's always going to give us the frequencies as set by these oscillators 1 and oscillator 2. So then we pass over to the noise section, where we can set its basic envelope. It has an attack and a decay, so a little bit more complex than our oscillator 1 and 2, and that can be set for the decay to be either linear or positive or negative forms of exponential curves. Then the noise can be adjusted to have a greater width, so larger, pushing out into the stereo field, or narrow, being more monophonic. But then really, to understand all of this and make sense out of it, we've got to have a firm grasp on the way that the mix works down below here. And it's a little bit strange, but the way this works is the OSC dial here sets the balance between oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. Then the noise dial here sets the balance between both oscillators 1 and 2, however they've been mixed by the OSC mixer dial here, and the noise source. So if we start by adjusting this all the way down, and I trigger a note, you can hear that I'm only getting oscillator or pure sine tones out of this. And then as I sweep this over, we get more and more noise, and eventually we'll lose those oscillators until it's just noise. And if we sweep back to getting those oscillators, now we can go over and use the other one to balance between the oscillator 1, there's oscillator 1, or moving over to oscillator 2. And if we set this in the middle, then we can experiment with the tuning and the decay of both of those oscillators. So if we look at oscillator 1, set its tuning, oscillators 2, or oscillator 2's offset in relationship to oscillator 1. So as I move this down, you can hear they're both going down, adjusting the decay of them. Really long, but we could take that higher. Oops, a little peaking there, so I'll pull down the volume. Notice that oscillator 1, the lower note, is now the only one that rings out. But as I increase the percentage that oscillator 2's decay is of oscillator 1's decay time, it rings out equally as long, or some fraction of it. Cool. Then we can come down here and crossfade back into just the noise, get rid of those oscillators, and focus on the noise for just a second. We have the attack. which only is a very short attack. It's up to just under 32 milliseconds or shorter. Then our decay period, up to a second long or really short, controlling its exponentialness versus linearness. And then the overall width, if you've got headphones on versus, sounds like it's in the center of your head versus on the sides of your head. And while we leave it just with this white noise, we can explore the filter section. We have a high cut for eliminating high frequencies, a low cut for eliminating low frequencies, and then a Q that affects both of these. So Q is how much focus or emphasis is on these two filters' cutoff points. So as I boost it, almost gets to the point where it's self-resonating or self-oscillating there. So we can hear both of those points of cutoff being now more emphasized and more focused. So I'll pull that back down, bring back in our two oscillators. And now we could add in some more effects, adjust how much velocity sensitivity there is. So if I play softer or harder notes, does the volume of the snare, or is the volume of the snare affected in any way? And then the overall volume. So that's the E-Snare, fairly straightforward device, two oscillators plus a noise generator and a low cut and a high cut filter and some really simple envelopes. So hope you found this video helpful. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave any questions or comments you may have below. And thanks again for watching. All right, bye-bye.